Hey there, it's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
Hey, this guy's back, and we're so happy about it. Pastor Mike Ashcraft, he's a senior pastor of Port City Church in North Carolina there, and still love the waves on the back of his wall there. Used to live in Atlanta, but he heard God's voice. He said, "Go to North Carolina." Thank you for being obedient, Pastor.
He said, "Get out of the traffic of Atlanta and go be at the beach."
Hey, didn't we talk about the traffic in Port City before? There's not much at all.
It gets bad in the summertime, and people complain about it. But at least everybody's only going 25 or 30 miles an hour, and not 85 and 90 like they are in Atlanta. So it's like same amount of people, just a lot slower pace.
Yeah, very true.
We wanted to catch up with you, of course, about the book and also about the church. How's it going? Sure. And I mean, I think since we've talked, I'm trying to remember when we talked. I know we did talk about the book, but we've got, challenges in Ukraine, inflation, gas prices, a looming recession, so many things. What are you saying to the folks there to keep them encouraged and moving forward?
You know, our biggest, I think, message that we've been talking about for the last probably 5 or 6 years is how radically different the way of Jesus actually is than what most of us are accustomed to. And that much of what he is doing when he invites us to seek first the kingdom, it isn't for us to get our act together as much as it is a radical reorientation of the way we think, what we see, and how we process, especially much of what happens in the world around us.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Yeah. And your book, which is to be concluded, How to Prevent Your Past from Piling Up and Find Hope for Your Future. And as I mentioned about recession, the last one that we had, 2000, I think it was 2008, and we felt the effects of that one for some time. It's a little difficult, and I've said this before on the show, for me, because we took a hit in so many ways, finally got our head above the water, and now we see challenges happening. My mind wants to go back to 2008 and panic. And so, but I need to not do that for my own sake, my own mental health, and for the sake of my family. So let's talk a little bit about this. How do I keep my past from piling up so I can move ahead, Mike?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge, and what the book really talks about, is the fact that so many of us, our whole frame of reference becomes either avoiding our past because it was bad or hard, or repeating it because it was good, and we want to sort of keep that going. This leads to a lot of just sort of systemic problems that we, even in our own personal lives, we do things, we expect them to work the same way over and over and over again, not recognizing or realizing that things are actually changing around us all the time. And what the surprising discovery about this book, I really originally wrote it to be very practical, sort of taking time to mark points in time, to do reflection, understand what God has done and his faithfulness to us, and how that actually informs our posture in the future. But what it really became about was, and it had to do with this idea of reorienting ourselves. And I keep using that word because for me, whenever I find something that works, I tend to hold on to it and then try to systematize it and then reproduce it and then get everybody else to do the same thing.
Right.
And what God invites us to do is to walk with him, to learn from him, to live with him. And this requires a real sensitivity, which we all know. But the way I think about this is just to simply be faithful in the moment. And this has helped me. Honestly, I wrote about this in the book, sort of a panic attack I had about 10 years ago. And what happened was, the church had grown, and everybody was telling me, "Oh, Mike, you've done such a great job." And all the metrics of success were all, like doing the right, like everybody thinks, "Oh, your church is big. This has happened." I pulled into the parking lot one day and I thought, what have I gotten myself into? I realized I had no idea what to do. And it was almost this declaration of defeat. Like, I don't know what to do. And it was just overwhelming. And I honestly thought, okay, I just need to quit and go find something else to do because I'm in over my head. I don't know what to do. And what I remember thinking is what God said to me. And it was literally like one of those moments that you have where you're so overwhelmed and you feel like you want to run so badly. And in that moment, I remember just God saying to me, "Mike, all you have to do is to be faithful to me in this moment. You don't have to know what to do. 2 years from now, 10 years from now, you just have to be able to trust me in this moment. And it was that whole process of learning how to, and really turning this declaration of, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do, into a question. And say, okay, Lord, if I don't know what to do, could you show me what to do? Would you be faithful to lead me the same way you have for the last, 22 years, or at that time, 12 years at the church, and really throughout most of my life. And I found that God is so faithful to us when we just position ourselves and say, Lord, would you show me, would you lead me and guide me in what you want? And for my pledge, not to get too far and try to calculate how this is going to work, but rather just to trust him and to be faithful in the moment. When I can be faithful with him in the moment, what I realize is I can actually be faithful with him, or to him, for my future.
That's so good.
Talk about the premise of the book. I mean, just the title is catching to me. To be concluded. We're so used to to be continued, and you've got that scratched out and concluded on there. And how to keep your past from piling up. So talk about that. How do we put a conclusion, put an end to things that have happened in the past, so we can start a new story and move on instead of continuing from the past?
Yeah, and one of the other surprising things about this, Dan, is that a lot of people, they attribute the chaos in our lives to our pace, which pace, don't get me wrong, can be a problem. But I think it's also rhythms. And part of the way the book starts off is with the Netflix binge, where we just sort of, one episode bleeds into the next. And before we know it, we've watched, 2 seasons of a show.
Hey, I couldn't help it. Okay. I got into it. And I was watching it the other day.
and even the little box at the bottom, like, kind of compels you. It's just like, hey, your show's going to continue in 5, 4, it just counts it down and builds anticipation to what's next, which is not in and itself of a bad thing, to anticipate what's next. The problem is when our lives just bleed from one episode into the next, one season into the next, we don't ever get clarity or any sort of perspective, which just tends to be overwhelming. And I think it just contributes to a lot of the anxiety that we feel. And what's interesting is this isn't a new idea. God has actually woven this into the very fabric of creation with the idea of a Sabbath, that every 7 days, there's a break. And actually every 24 hours, there's actually, a day ends and a new one begins. And we just talked about this at our church we're doing a summer Sabbath series, reading through the Psalms. And, in the Hebrew culture, the day began at sundown. So the whole origin of or design of creation is that we begin with rest, and then we rise to work from that place. So it creates these natural rhythms, these natural places for us to conclude one thing for the specific purpose of beginning something else, something new. And that's really what it comes down to. And in our world, where we just have lights and technology and all the things that eliminate any natural rhythms, we can just run 24/7, and we end up doing that. And I think we have to discipline ourselves to sort of put a stake in the ground, to turn our phones off, to sleep, to rest, and not only just get sleep, but to actually let our souls and our minds and everything sort of settle down. Probably 10 or 12 years ago, I remember the first time, the church had been going for about 12 years. There's a little island south of us called Bald Head Island, and it's it's private. You can't get there by car. It's only golf carts and boats and bikes on the island, and there's nothing to do. And some friends of ours let us stay there for an entire week, 7 days. And I got there, and like 2 days in, I was like crawling out of my skin because there was just nothing to do. I think at that time the internet didn't even work there. And what I realized was that I had never probably actually stopped. I had, even my vacations or my periods of rest were like touch and goes, right? You land on the runway, throttle down, then throttle right back up, and you take off again. And it took me about 4 or 5 days to get settled in that pace of what came to be real rest. And since then, I've sort of added that kind of activity into my life to deliberately not just slow down enough to get perspective, but actually stop, let things sink in, let things sort of kind of meld together, get some perspective, and then head out into the future with some measure of intentionality.
That's so good. Pastor Mike Ashcraft, senior pastor, Port City Church, North Carolina. Pick up his book. I'm sure there'll be a new book out coming soon. Great messages on his website, the church there. I've seen a few of them, really, really good. One of my favorite scriptures, be still and know that I am God. My problem is I can't be still. I I like you, I try to zone everything out. All right, here's a great moment, and then I'm like, okay, this is hard. I mean, everything within me wants to pick up a remote, wants to, it's very difficult in our culture to do that. I'm not sure. Is it that way globally? Are there cultures that are easy? That's easy for them, or is it just us? You think?
I'm sure there are cultures where they just don't have sort of the technology, or they operate more on, more of natural rhythms. I've been to some places like that, but I think the challenge for us is that we do have access to basically leverage our time all the time. And I think it comes down to, and I think we recognize this, it just comes down to how important do we think our own sense of sanity really is. And for me, the illusion that I had worked myself into is that the harder I work, the more I do, the more God is going to do through me. And, one of the lines in the book, I write this has kind of been a mantra for mine, is just because I have no idea how God's going to do something, it has no bearing on his capacity to do it. Right? Because I can't understand how God's going to pull something off. It has absolutely no bearing on his ability to do whatever he wants to do. So I spend my mind trying to figure out how God's going to pull this off, rather than sort of letting myself settle and saying, God, I trust you to do this. And I've learned this in so many ways. Things that I thought were going to produce this result didn't. And then God comes in and does it in a completely, a different way. And the Bible is full of stories like this. And so part of what, I try to do, and I do this by way of discipline. We do live at the beach, but you can do this anywhere. I go for a walk on the beach. And oftentimes when I would go, I would take my phone with me, and I didn't get on my phone, but I would have it. So in case like I'm praying and God gives me some kind of insight, I want to write it down, or some cool sermon idea, I want to write it down. And what I remember was the pressure to, like, if I'm on a walk and I'm communing with God and listening to God, something productive has to happen. I need an insight. I need something to talk about, something to write about. So I began to leave my phone in my car. And I remember thinking, like, I'm walking on the beach, and then God would, like, give me something, or there'd be some great thought, and I don't have anything to write it down with. And you feel like you're wasting something. And what I realized is that maybe God just wants to speak to me. Maybe God just wants to be with me. Maybe he's not trying to use me to do things. Sometimes he just wants to comfort me and to bring peace to me and to give me sort of life and hope in those moments that don't necessarily need to be shared with anybody else. And that was a profound lesson for me, to start to realize where those moments where you actually experienced God's peace, and I could hold on to those things and then enter back into sort of the chaos that a lot of my life would be full of.
That's so good. That is so good. Pastor Mike, check out his stuff. Check out his book. There we have him on social media at Mike. What's that say? Mike Ashcraft on social media there. And check out the website, the church website, and you can check out some amazing messages.
And to be concluded, you can get that pretty much anywhere you get books, right?
You can. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all over. Yep.
Okay.
Let's catch up with you in the fall and see what's going on. Maybe there's a book brewing. Maybe, I don't know, maybe something new.
There might be one brewing. I just started it. And so we'll see how this one begins to shake out.
All right.
You want a teaser for it?
Yeah, we appreciate your time. Love hanging with you. Hey, let's take a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.